I drove more than 2 hours to get to my lake house, the only place that still felt like peace since my wife passed away. But the second I stepped onto the porch, I froze in my tracks. There was my son, Calvin, sitting back in my chair like he owned it, his wife and her parents spread out beside him, drinking wine as if they'd been living there for years. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not welcome here anymore. This place belongs to them now." I smiled, slow, steady, but inside I'd already made a decision. They weren't going to forget this day. That smile? The kind people confuse with surrender. My hand tightened on the handle of my weekend bag until I felt the veins in my wrist pressing hard against the skin. The late afternoon sun spilled gold across the lake, the same water Eleanor and I used to sit beside, counting ripples until the horizon swallowed the light. That memory slipped away fast under the weight of what I was seeing now. Calvin leaned back, ankle perched over his knee in a way so casual it felt rehearsed. Genevieve sat snug beside him, her hair perfectly in place, holding her wine glass like it was part of her outfit. Her parents were there too, Lawrence with his slicked silver hair, and Sylvia wearing that polite but superior half-smile that never really reached her eyes. They looked too comfortable, like they'd been waiting for this moment. Lawrence gave me a nod, the kind you give a handyman you hired to fix a leaky faucet. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was flat, calm. That's the tone I use when I'm deciding which part of me to show, the part that compromises or the part that tears things apart. "You heard me, Dad," Calvin replied, not a trace of doubt in his voice. "We're here for the weekend. And when I say we, I mean Genevieve's parents too. They're going to start settling in. This is theirs now." I looked past him into the living room. Eleanor's knitted throw was draped across the arm of the couch, the same couch she and I picked out together. On the coffee table sat the cedar coasters I'd made in my workshop the summer before she passed. Sylvia's wine glass rested right on the wood, ignoring them completely. "Since when?" I asked slowly. "Does something I own become someone else's without me even knowing?" Genevieve set her glass down carefully. "Since we decided it makes more sense this way. They need a place, Arthur, and you hardly come here. Letting it sit empty is selfish." Empty. That word hit me like a punch. I'd been there just last month, sanding the porch railing. The month before, I replaced the screen door. But none of that mattered to them. This wasn't about me. It was about control. Lawrence finally spoke, his voice dripping with fake courtesy. "We're grateful for your generosity, Arthur. We'll take excellent care of it." I didn't answer him. My eyes stayed locked on Calvin. "And you thought you'd just announce this while sitting in my chair?" Calvin's lips twitched, almost a smile. Better to be direct. There was a time, not so long ago, when just one look from me could make Calvin shift in his seat, rework his words. But now, he didn't even blink. Somewhere between his college graduation and this porch, my son decided he was the one giving orders. I stepped fully onto the porch. No one moved an inch to make space. "I drove 2 hours to get here," I said evenly. "I'd like to go inside." "Not today," Calvin shot back. "We've got dinner plans. You'd just be in the way." "In the way," I repeated, letting the words hang as I looked at each of them. Sylvia crossed her legs, adjusting her shawl like she was settling in for a show. Genevieve smirked faintly at Calvin. Lawrence refilled his wine. "All right," I finally said, the word tasting like metal in my mouth. "Enjoy your evening." I turned, walked down the steps, and crossed the gravel to my car. Behind me, their voices carried, Calvin's laugh, Sylvia asking about the wine vintage. I shut the car door, and it cut them off. The engine started smooth on the first turn, German precision humming under the hood. As I reversed, I caught one last glimpse of them on the porch. Calvin wasn't watching me leave. He was already back in conversation, already erasing me from the scene. The road away from Clearview Lake runs through a stretch of pine that always smells like rain, even on days the ground is bone dry. Eleanor loved that smell. We used to drive that road with the windows down, her hair flying wild as she laughed at something on the radio. I gripped the wheel tighter. My son had just told me I wasn't allowed in the one place that still felt like her. And the worst part wasn't the boldness. It was how effortless it was for him. No hesitation. No shame. By the time I hit the highway, the sun had dropped, and the air had cooled. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I ignored it. I wanted silence. When I pulled into my driveway in Phoenix, the clock on the dash read 9:14 p.m. The house was dark except for the porch light I always left on, Eleanor's rule. A home should never greet you in darkness, she used to say. Inside, I dropped my bag in the hall and just stood there, keys still in hand. The quiet felt different tonight. Not peaceful. Hollow. In the kitchen, I brewed a pot of coffee, not because I needed it, but because I needed something to do. I carried it to my study, sat down in the leather chair that had shaped itself to me over the years, and stared at a framed photo of Eleanor on the bookshelf. It was taken at the lake house one summer evening, the sun glowing behind her and turning her hair into copper. I wondered what she would have said if she'd been there on that porch with me. Eleanor didn't raise her voice often, but when she did, the whole room shifted. She wouldn't have let Calvin get halfway through his little speech. The phone buzzed again. This time, I picked it up. A text from Calvin. Just so you know, we've decided the lake house will be theirs permanently. Don't come back. No explanation. No discussion. Just a line in the sand over something that wasn't his to give away. I read it twice, then set the phone face down on the desk and stared at the dark window. For 3 years since Eleanor died, I'd bent over backward as a father. I said yes to every favor, wrote checks without question, showed up when asked, and vanished when told. I told myself it was for the sake of staying close to my only child. That maybe if I gave enough, we'd keep some version of the family Eleanor had fought to hold together. But families don't take what's yours and tell you you're not welcome. Families don't scratch your name off the door of your own house. That thought hit me as I took a slow sip of coffee. Underneath the sting of humiliation, something else began to settle in me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. I've worked construction all my life. I understand foundations, how to build them strong, and how to quietly weaken them until the whole thing comes down without anyone noticing. And as I sat there in the dim light of my study, it hit me. My son had just handed me a deadline without even realizing it. They were there now, sure. They'd stay as long as they thought they could get away with it. I glanced back at Eleanor's photo. She was smiling in that way she always did, like she knew something I hadn't figured out yet. You'd want me to handle this my way, wouldn't you? I whispered. The street outside was silent. Inside, I set my mug down, pulled out a notepad, and wrote one line. They will never forget this day. It wasn't some rash promise. It was a plan, a blueprint. And in my world, blueprints always get built. The phone rang the next evening, just past 6. I was in the kitchen, rinsing off a plate from the simple dinner I'd thrown together. My hands were still wet when I answered, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder. Dad. Calvin's voice was clipped, businesslike. The kind of tone you use when you already know where the conversation's headed. Calvin. My reply was flat, unreadable. Listen carefully, he said. Genevieve and I talked it over. The lake house is going to belong to her parents now. Lawrence and Sylvia will be moving in permanently. My hand froze under the stream of water. Come again. You heard me. His words were steady, casual, like he was telling me the weather. It just makes sense. They need a real place to live, and you barely use it. I shut off the tap. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound left in the kitchen. You don't own the lake house, Calvin. You can't give it away. I can when it's the right thing to do. I let out one short, dry laugh. The right thing for who? For all of us, he answered without hesitation. They've been struggling. You've got more space than you need. You're, older now. Alone. It's not like you're taking buddies up there every weekend. Older now. Alone. He let those words hang like he expected them to sink in. 3 years ago, right after Eleanor died, that line would have broken me in half. Back then, I'd have stumbled over myself to offer concessions, anything to keep him close. I thought if I lost my son's approval, I'd be losing Eleanor all over again. But the way he said it this time, like my life already had an expiration date he'd circled on his calendar, it had the opposite effect. It hardened me. Calvin, I said slowly, I worked 30 years for that property. I built the business that paid for every stone, every board, every damn screw in that house. Your mother and I. That's what fathers do, he cut in. Provide. Make sure their family's taken care of. I provided for you, Calvin. Not for your in-laws. They're family now. No. I snapped back, my voice sharpening. They're Genevieve's family. I barely know them. The line went quiet for a moment, static crackling in the silence. Dad, you're being selfish. I let out a low, disbelieving laugh. Selfish? You've got some nerve, son. I'll give you that. I'm serious. We've done a lot for you since Mom died. My grip on the phone tightened. Everything you've done for me? You mean the wedding I paid for? The car I bought you when yours broke down? The college loans I covered? Or maybe the deposit for that overpriced apartment? That's just what fathers do, he repeated, like it was gospel. And what sons don't do is steal from their fathers. You hardly go there anymore, he shot back. What's the point of it sitting empty? It's not empty. I'm there when I want to be. You're clinging to a house, Dad. It's unhealthy. Mom wouldn't. The air shifted around me. My voice dropped, each word distinct. Do not speak for your mother. Silence stretched longer this time. You can't say no to me on this, he said at last, as if it were already settled. Yes, I can. You think you can stop this? We're moving them in next weekend. It's happening. No, I said again, calm and final. His voice edged toward anger. Don't do this, Dad. Don't make it harder than it has to be. You'll just embarrass yourself. For years, I'd bent over backward to avoid embarrassing myself in front of Calvin. I kept my voice level, kept my requests minimal, kept my wallet open. But right there, in that moment, I realized something freeing. The embarrassment wasn't mine. It was his. I'm done talking about this, I said. You're not in charge anymore, he fired back. If you fight this, you'll lose. We'll take it anyway. There was a time I would have tried to reason with him, find some middle ground. But years in construction had taught me how to spot a negotiation where the other side had no intention of budging. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just hung up. For the first time in our lives, I ended the call first. The phone sat dark on the counter, my faint reflection staring back from the glass. My heartbeat was steady, my breath even. Such a small thing. Just a click, the deliberate end of a call. But it felt like the opening move in a game I'd been avoiding for years. I rinsed the soap from my hands, dried them on a towel, and stood for a moment in the kitchen doorway. The quiet pressed in again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was alive, charged. Because now I knew two things. First, Calvin had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Second, I was finally ready to do something about it. I didn't sleep that night. I went through the motions, shower, brushed my teeth, even flipped through the sports section of the paper. But when I lay down at 11, my mind wouldn't stop moving. The ceiling above me turned into a blank whiteboard. Monday, May 12th. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, May 17th. Dates lined up in my head like milestones on a job schedule. 30 years in construction had trained me to think that way. Phase by phase, deadline by deadline. Always keeping an eye on the other guy. And Calvin had just given me one. They're moving in next weekend, he said, like it was already written in stone. Like all I had to do was step aside and let it happen. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't some half-formed idea. They had a fixed target. And a fixed target can be hit from more angles than one. I rolled onto my side, eyes drifting to the empty space where Eleanor used to sleep. She'd hated deadlines, but she loved preparation. Measure twice, cut once, she always said when we worked on house projects together. My thoughts started falling into place, structured like blueprints. This wasn't just about protecting the lake house. It was about showing Calvin, Genevieve, and her polished, opportunistic parents that I wasn't a man you could push around like a couch in the living room. For the first 3 years after Eleanor's death, that's exactly what I'd been. I went wherever they moved me, agreed to whatever they asked, and convinced myself that saying yes was the only way to keep family from slipping away. Looking back now, the pattern was embarrassingly clear. 8 months after Eleanor's funeral, Calvin called about his car. It's on its last legs, Dad. Genevieve needs something reliable for work. That turned into $35,000 for a shiny new SUV, delivered inside a week. A year later came the condo. The landlord's selling, Dad. We have to move fast. I wrote a check for the deposit without even seeing the place. After that, a small loan to furnish it, which ballooned into 5 figures. Every time, I told myself Eleanor would have wanted me to help. Every time, the thank yous got shorter and the requests got larger. And now here we were. By midnight, I stopped pretending to sleep. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, brewed a pot of strong black coffee, and sat at the table with a legal pad. At the top, I wrote one word in block letters: options. Underneath, I listed legal defense, Marcus Lee, lock and key changes, might escalate too fast, surveillance/monitoring, psychological deterrent, public embarrassment, risky. I stared at that list. Legal defense was the obvious starting point. I'd known Marcus for 20 years. He'd negotiated my biggest contracts, kept my company out of 3 bogus lawsuits, and once talked a zoning board into reversing a decision that would have cost me $500,000. Lock and key changes? Too soon. If Calvin thought I was panicking, he'd only push harder. No, I needed him to think I was passive. Surveillance? That had teeth. Not just for watching them, but for controlling the environment. Psychological deterrent. That one made me smile for the first time in days. I'd used it in business before. Quiet pressure that makes the other side back off, convinced it was their own idea. I crossed out the word options and replaced it with advantages. Because that's what this really came down to. Rule 1. Never negotiate from desperation. Rule 2. Control the information. Rule 3. Own the timing. In my head, I could almost hear Eleanor. You're building something again, aren't you? By 2 a.m., I had a skeleton of a plan. Phase 1. Talk to Marcus. Get the legal walls in place before Calvin even realized there were walls. Phase 2. Install a system at Clearview that would make life very uncomfortable for anyone who didn't belong. Phase 3. Let Calvin walk right into it. And all of it timed perfectly against the one advantage he'd handed me himself, the weekend deadline. At 6:45, sunlight began to slip through the blinds. I showered, shaved, and pulled on the Navy sport coat I used to wear to client meetings. Not because Marcus cared about appearances, because I did. You dress for the work you're about to do. By 8:30, I was in his downtown office. Marcus stood when I walked in, his handshake as firm as ever. Arthur, good to see you. Wish I could say the same. I muttered, lowering myself into the leather chair across from his desk. I've got a family situation. Property dispute. His eyebrows ticked upward. Commercial or residential? Residential. Clearview Lake Villa. That's in your name. It is. Bought it outright 12 years ago. He leaned back. Who's making the claim? My son. Marcus didn't flinch, but his pen stopped halfway across the page. Family disputes get messy. I don't want messy. I want airtight. We went through the basics: title deed, purchase history, even my will. Marcus outlined protections. Review the deed, reinforce ownership with a trust if needed, and create a clear record of threats or coercion. How fast can we move? I asked. For a basic review, a few days. More advanced protections, 2 to 3 weeks. Too long, I said flatly. They plan to move in next weekend. He studied me for a beat, then nodded. Then we start immediately. Bring me every document you've got by tomorrow morning. And Arthur, document everything. Texts, calls, in-person conversations. If they threaten or demand anything, write it down with the date and time. I left his office sharper than I'd felt in years. Outside, Phoenix skies stretched hard and blue. Halfway to my car, my phone buzzed. Calvin. Against my better judgment, I answered. Finally, he said. We need to settle this nonsense. Genevieve's parents are expecting to move in next weekend. Don't be difficult. I unlocked my car door and slid behind the wheel. The only nonsense is you thinking you can hand away my property. It's not nonsense, Dad. They've already started packing. That's unfortunate. They'll just have to unpack. You're going to make this ugly. You already made it ugly. He sighed like I was a client refusing what he thought was a perfect deal. Lawrence lost his job last month. Sylvia's on disability. They need this house more than you do. That's not my problem to solve. It's called family spirit. Like the spirit you showed when you told me to get off my own porch. Silence. Then his voice came back colder. They're still coming Saturday. With or without your blessing. He hung up. I sat in the driver's seat, staring through the windshield. Saturday. That gave me 5 days. 5 days to turn my lake house into a place they'd never want to set foot in again. Tuesday morning brought a strange light, the kind that flattens everything, leaves no shadows, no warmth. I was at my desk before 7, papers spread in clean stacks. The villa's deed, tax records, insurance documents. Marcus would get them today, but my mind wasn't only on legal armor. Paperwork was necessary, sure, but it wasn't enough. Calvin had shown me one thing. He didn't fear consequences he couldn't see. He thought this was just a fight between stubbornness and inevitability. Calvin figured if he leaned hard enough, I'd fold just like always. That meant I had to change the ground under his feet. I sat there with my coffee, eyes locked on the picture of Eleanor sitting on the corner of my desk. I'd snapped it years back, her hair caught in a breeze rolling off Clearview Lake. That photo used to calm me. Now it reminded me of what I was protecting, and why quitting wasn't an option. By 8 o'clock, I was walking 3 houses down, stopping at a narrow ranch with a dented white mailbox that read Miles. Darren Miles was 52, single, and the type of guy who could wire a full home theater before most folks even found the instruction manual. We'd met the winter after Eleanor died, when a pipe burst in his basement and left him ankle-deep in ice water. I'd called in a plumber I trusted, made sure the job was done, and refused a dime. Darren never forgot it. He answered the door in jeans and a faded startup t-shirt, glasses smeared from too many hours staring at screens. "Arthur," he said, stepping aside. "Everything all right? Depends on what you call all right." Inside, his office looked like a server rack exploded. 3 big monitors glowed in the dark, wires looping like jungle vines, shelves stacked with circuit boards and gadgets I couldn't even name. He waved me toward a chair. "I need a hand with a project," I told him. His eyes narrowed. "What kind of project?" "The kind that uses motion sensors, lights, sound, maybe a few visual tricks. And it has to kick in automatically when someone walks into a room." Darren leaned back, a grin tugging at his mouth. "So a haunted house. Close. Except the point isn't fun. It's to make people leave and never want to come back." That got a laugh out of him. "All right, now I'm listening. Who are we scaring off?" "Better if you don't know all the details. Just think of it as keeping squatters away." He studied me for a beat, then nodded. "Fair enough. I can do memorable." We spent the next hour sketching out what that meant. Motion detectors in every major room, tied to lighting sequences that would disorient without hurting anyone. Speakers hidden in vents and corners, ready to pump out footsteps in empty halls, creaking doors, whispers too low to make sense of. Compact projectors angled to throw shifting shadows across the walls, figures that moved in your peripheral vision. And at the center of it all, a control hub I could run remotely. "Can we tie in the plumbing?" I asked. "Showers, sinks, everything turning on at once." Darren grinned. "Oh yeah, just need to hook into the water controls. And it's all legal, standard smart home functions, just repurposed." By 10 o'clock, his SUV was half loaded. Boxes of sensors no bigger than smoke alarms, coils of programmable LED strips, projectors, and a tablet wired with his custom software. He moved like a man who'd been itching for an excuse to use his toys. The drive to Clearview took just under 2 hours. I kept my hands steady on the wheel while my mind mapped the villa, entryway, kitchen, living room, 3 bedrooms upstairs, and Eleanor's sewing room that I hadn't touched since she passed. Every space was about to become part of the act. When we pulled up, Darren gave a low whistle. "Nice place." "It's mine," I said flatly. "And I plan to keep it that way." Inside, the faint smell of cedar cleaner still lingered from the last time I'd scrubbed the floors. Being there without Eleanor still felt wrong. But today, wrong was mixed with purpose. We started at the front door. Darren mounted a motion sensor over the frame, synced it to the tablet. "When this trips," he said, "the living room lights start strobing, colors swapping fast. And the voice assistant will say," he typed something, and a calm but sharp voice filled the room. "Attention. You are not the owner of this property. Leave immediately." I couldn't help but smile. "Good." Upstairs, he angled projectors so tall shadows would crawl across the walls, moving when you weren't looking right at them. In the kitchen, he rigged the faucets to roar to life at command. Speakers slid behind bookshelves and under chairs, ready to leak random creaks, muffled steps, and half-heard whispers. "This runs on a closed system," Darren said, tucking cables behind a baseboard. "Separate from your Wi-Fi. They won't be able to just reset a router and kill it." "Backup power?" I asked. He grinned. "Got you covered. Hidden batteries in the basement will keep it humming for days, even if the breakers shut off." By mid-afternoon, the place looked untouched, but underneath, it was primed. A living room that looked normal would now blind and deafen you. A hallway that seemed quiet would make shadows crawl the second you stepped into it. We tested it all. Strobe lights flashing in hard, dizzying bursts. The voice assistant escalating warnings if movement continued. Faucets blasting water like a burst main after 30 seconds. Whispers that grew louder and closer the longer you stayed. "This'll do it," Darren said, eyes on the tablet. "It has to." When the gear was packed away, I stood in the entryway, staring out at the lake. The sun was sinking, painting the water copper. Eleanor always loved that hour, said it made the world look like it was holding its breath. I closed the door, locked it, and set the system on standby. In my mind, I could already see it. Calvin stepping inside, all borrowed confidence, Genevieve trailing behind with her polished parents, believing they were walking into their new home, and the house itself answering back. The game shifted that Wednesday morning. Darren showed up earlier than I expected, hammering at the door like he couldn't wait another second. When I opened it, he was balancing a tower of equipment cases on one hip, with a small projector tucked under his arm the way a quarterback tucks a football. I couldn't stop thinking about it, he said as he stepped inside. Got a few ideas to make this even better. Darren's few ideas were never small. By the time we had everything loaded into his SUV, I'd counted 2 industrial backup batteries, a whole new spread of speakers, tiny things no bigger than shot glasses, and something he proudly called directional audio modules. Picture a flashlight, but for sound, he explained as we drove toward Clearview Lake. You aim it at one spot, and only the person standing right there hears it. Everyone else, nothing. I couldn't help picturing Calvin in the hallway, frozen stiff while a voice whispered directly into his ear, Genevieve and her parents standing just feet away, confused, hearing absolutely nothing. Perfect. When we pulled up, the villa looked untouched, just as we'd left it 2 days earlier. That was the beauty of Darren's setups, everything hidden in plain sight, waiting. We started with the projectors. He mounted one high in the upstairs landing, the lens angled to throw a shadow all the way down the hall. When he flicked it on, a long, wavering figure began pacing across the wall. Even knowing it was just light, my body tensed. Now imagine seeing that at 2 in the morning after a couple glasses of wine, Darren said with a smirk. He wasn't wrong. 2 more projectors went into the guest rooms, programmed to flicker shadows every few minutes, just enough to make someone question what they'd seen out of the corner of their eye. Then came the directional audio. Darren tucked one behind the crown molding in the entryway, almost invisible. We tested it. I stood on the welcome mat, and a low voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." 1 step left, gone. Step back, there it was again. Instant, unnerving, and deeply personal, like the house had singled me out. That one's gonna crawl right inside their skulls, Darren said, grinning. By mid-morning, the upstairs and main floor were fully armed. Lights still strobed on motion. Faucets still roared if you lingered more than 30 seconds. But now we'd added shadows that moved, voices that whispered, and that awful sense of not knowing what would happen next. In the basement, Darren slid one battery behind the paneling near the breaker box, the other under the stairwell. These'll keep everything running at least a week, even if someone kills the main, he said. And good luck finding them without ripping the place apart. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring down at the dim basement. Eleanor always hated that space. She used to say it felt like the kind of place where bad news lived. Today, though, it felt like the control room of a surgical operation. By noon, we were ready to test the whole sequence. We started at the entryway. Motion sensors tripped. Lights flared in sharp, jagged rhythm. The voice assistant gave its warning. Darren stepped into the living room, and the kitchen faucet exploded with water. Shadows played across the far wall. That whisper followed him like a ghost that knew his name. Upstairs, the landing projector sent its pacing figure sliding across the wall, while faint, irregular knocking drifted from the bedroom speakers. Not loud, just present. The kind of sound you'd swear was real until you opened the door and found nothing there. The timing was flawless. Each effect stacked on the last, every piece resetting after a few minutes of stillness, ready to fire again. This, Darren said, standing in the quiet villa with a grin, is a masterpiece. It's a tool, I corrected. But deep down, part of me agreed. We ate lunch out on the porch steps, sandwiches I'd packed, the lake stretching wide and calm in front of us. From the outside, the villa looked like nothing more than a quiet getaway, a safe retreat. Nobody could guess it was wired to fight back. Darren wiped his hands and glanced sideways at me. You know, Arthur, there's something damn satisfying about giving a house teeth. I thought of Eleanor. Of all the years she insisted the villa be a place of welcome. She wouldn't have liked the idea of teeth, but she would have understood the principle, protecting what's yours. By late afternoon, we had everything buttoned up, the system armed, and the control tablet paired to my phone. I could now monitor every feed, trigger sequences, even tweak the timing from anywhere. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway and looked back one last time. The rug lay straight, the curtains perfectly drawn. Every room looked ordinary. Yet now, every corner, every hallway, every quiet space was a tripwire. Back in Phoenix that night, I sat in my study with the tablet glowing beside me. The lake house feeds, entryway, living room, kitchen, hall, upstairs landing. All still, all waiting. At 8:39 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Calvin. We'll be there around 2 p.m. Saturday. Don't bother coming up. I stared at it for a moment, then let a slow smile spread across my face. Exact timing. He'd just given me the final piece I needed. 2 o'clock, Saturday. They'd roll in feeling confident, entitled, certain I was nowhere close. And the house, my house, would be ready to greet them. I closed the message without replying, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence settle. In construction, the most dangerous moment comes just before the first hammer strike. All the power is potential, all the change invisible. Saturday, the strike would land. May 17th, 1:48 p.m. On the entryway camera, the lake behind the house looked like a pane of blue glass. I sat in my study, 200 miles away, control tablet angled toward me, phone close by. Every system was armed, sensors primed, audio set, projections ready, water controls waiting. At 2:14 sharp, a dark silver SUV rolled into view. Calvin at the wheel. Genevieve in the passenger seat, sunglasses pushed up in her hair. In the back, Lawrence and Sylvia leaned forward, eager, like tourists craning for their first glimpse of a landmark. They didn't waste a second admiring the view. The SUV had barely stopped before the doors swung open and bodies spilled out, moving with the confidence of people who thought they already belonged there. Calvin circled to the back, popped the hatch, and started hauling bags. Genevieve stayed off to the side, pointing at the porch like a director calling shots. Lawrence dragged a rolling suitcase. Sylvia hugged a canvas tote tight against her side, the kind of bag you only bring when you plan to stay a while. Through the camera mic, I caught every detail. Gravel crunching under their shoes, a gull crying overhead, the subtle shuffle of luggage wheels. Then Lawrence stopped at the foot of the steps, his gaze snagging on Darren's latest touch, a brushed steel plate on cedar, mounted right by the porch. The words were carved deep in bold black letters. Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk. Sylvia froze first, her fingers tightening on the tote. What's this supposed to mean? Lawrence leaned in. Some kind of joke. Genevieve laughed, brushing it off. Oh, that's just Dad being weird. He's always doing stuff like this. Ignore it. Calvin didn't even glance at the sign. Come on, let's get inside. But Sylvia wasn't about to let it go. I'm not walking past this thing. It looks ridiculous. Makes the whole place feel wrong. Before anyone could argue, she grabbed the bracket with both hands and yanked. The screws squealed, metal tearing free from wood. The plate hit the porch with a harsh clang. She nudged it aside with her foot like she was swatting away trash. There, she said, brushing off her palms. First thing to go. I watched the steel glint in the sun where it had fallen. One small victory for Sylvia, so she thought. They climbed the steps in order. Calvin first, Genevieve close behind, Lawrence with his suitcase, Sylvia last, wearing that smug little smile of someone convinced they've already fixed the place. Calvin pulled out a key. My key. A copy of the spare I'd given him years ago. He slid it into the lock, turned, and the door opened smooth as butter. Welcome home, he said over his shoulder, leading them inside. I switched the tablet feed to the living room. One by one, they crossed the rug Eleanor and I had bought in Santa Fe. Sylvia's voice carried clear through the mic. Oh, it's even nicer than I imagined. Lawrence dropped his suitcase near the stairs. Feels like a proper home. Genevieve drifted toward the kitchen. Let's figure out dinner. I'm starving. Calvin stood dead center, hands on his hips, surveying the place like a man evaluating property he thought he owned. The easy posture reminded me of his teenage years, back when he knew Mom and Dad would handle whatever he broke. For the next hour, I let them roam. Lawrence explored upstairs. Sylvia fussed with the couch cushions. Genevieve pulled a bottle of wine from her bag, poured herself a glass, and claimed the kitchen. Calvin fiddled with the thermostat like he was testing out his new toy. Every so often, someone triggered a motion sensor, and my tablet lit up with alerts. But I didn't touch a thing. Not yet. Let them relax. Let them sink in. By 8:30, the sun was gone, the lake dark. The upstairs landing camera showed Lawrence in pajama pants, heading for the guest room. Sylvia was already in bed with a paperback propped on her knees. Genevieve washed dishes in the kitchen. Calvin sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, smirking like the day had gone exactly his way. I waited, watching the sound profile graph on the tablet dip toward silence. 10:03 p.m. From my chair in Phoenix, I leaned forward, tapped one icon. Execute full sequence. The villa woke up instantly. Lights in every room snapped into strobing chaos, not soft, but violent, flashing red, blue, white, disorienting as a police raid. Upstairs, the pacing shadow slid across the hallway wall. Speakers whispered from every corner, low and urgent. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. In the kitchen, water gushed from the faucet, hammering against steel. Upstairs, showers roared, steam clouding the landing. The camera caught Lawrence stumbling out, shielding his eyes. Pat, what the hell is going on? Sylvia's shrill voice carried from the guest room. Lawrence, there's someone in here. In the living room feed, Genevieve spun in circles, shadows sliding across the walls around her. Calvin, did you set something up? Calvin jumped off the couch. No, it's probably some power. He cut himself off as the voice assistant thundered over everything. Attention. Unauthorized occupants detected. Leave the premises immediately. Then the directional audio hit. Calvin froze mid-step, his head jerking as the whisper slid into his ear alone. Get out. He spun, searching for the source, but Genevieve and her parents were already panicking. Genevieve fought the kitchen faucet, twisting knobs. Water kept gushing. Lawrence yanked the fridge door open like that would help. Sylvia clutched the doorway, eyes wide, following a shadow that slithered across the ceiling. Upstairs, the guest room projector flared to life. A figure leaned in the doorway, tall and silent. Sylvia screamed, Calvin, call the police. He fumbled for his phone. But even if he connected, I knew exactly what the cops would find. A smart home doing what it was built to do. Nothing illegal, nothing broken, just malfunctioning. The landing feed caught Lawrence grabbing Sylvia's arm. We're leaving. Now. Genevieve's voice overlapped his. I can't get the front door open. 30-second delay on the smart lock. Just long enough to make the walls feel like they were closing in. Calvin pulled at the handle, muscles bunching. At last the lock clicked. They bolted, spilling onto the porch, blinking hard against the night. Not one of them spared a glance at the steel plate Sylvia had torn down. Seconds later, they were in the SUV, reversing down the drive. The camera feed followed their taillights until the trees swallowed them whole. The villa went quiet again, not a sound left to challenge me. I leaned back in my chair, my hands resting easy on the armrests, like a man who knew he'd just pulled off something flawless. The sequence had played out exactly as I'd designed. No glitches, no second chances, no way for them to spin the story back in their favor. Calvin thought he'd shown up to claim his brand new property. Truth was, he'd just stepped into mine. The camera feeds from the villa were still glowing on my desk when the phone rang at 7:31 a.m. that Sunday. The screen lit up with his name, Calvin. I let it buzz 3 times before I picked up. Morning, son, I said, my voice carrying just the right mix. Warm enough to sound like a father, steady enough to hide the truth. What did you do, Dad? His words hit sharp, brittle, like a man running on adrenaline and a lack of sleep. What do you mean? I asked, keeping it light. Don't play dumb with me. His voice cracked high, too thin for control. The house went crazy last night. Lights flashing, water gushing, voices screaming at us to leave. Genevieve's parents are traumatized. My mom, Sylvia, was crying for hours. Lawrence thought he saw. He broke off, like even saying it might let the memory drag him under. I shifted in my chair, my eyes flicking to the frozen image on the monitor. Clearview Lake Villa, sunlight spilling across the rug of an empty living room. That sounds terrifying, I said, softening my tone just enough to sound concerned. Did you call anyone? We called the police, he said, bitterness dripping through every syllable. They came at 6, searched the whole place, said nothing was wrong. Well, I said lightly, that's a relief. Relief? His voice shot up. We didn't sleep for 8 hours. Carl collapsed twice. It's Lawrence, I corrected absently. I don't care what his name is right now. Silence stretched between us before I spoke again. Calvin, sometimes these modern smart homes glitch. Power surges, faulty wiring, things happen. Don't you dare patronize me, he snapped. This wasn't random. It was deliberate, and we both know you had something to do with it. I smiled at the monitor, though he couldn't see me. Calvin, I was in Phoenix all night, 200 miles away. How could I possibly control a house from here? You could have hired someone. To do what? Stage an elaborate haunted house, just to spook you? I let a small chuckle slip. That's a stretch, don't you think? His breathing came ragged through the line. This isn't over. You hear me? We're not letting some technical glitch scare us off. We're moving in. I tilted my head toward the camera feeds, still showing nothing but emptiness. Maybe the house doesn't like strangers, I said. The silence that followed stretched a full 10 seconds. I underestimated you, Calvin said finally, his voice low now, just a shade shy of fear. Happens, I said. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down gently, tapping the desk once with my fingers. If last night was the performance, this morning was the review. They were rattled. Cracks were forming. But a good show always raises the stakes in Act 2. By 10 o'clock, the entryway camera lit up again. A white sedan rolled into the driveway. A man stepping out with a heavy black toolbox, the kind locksmiths carry. Calvin was right beside him, gesturing at the front door with frustration big enough to see through the grainy feed. The locksmith crouched at the lock, then straightened, shaking his head. The audio feed caught his words. These aren't standard locks, sir. They're integrated systems, biometrics, wireless backups, full automation. Can't you just replace them? Calvin pressed. Not without rewriting the whole network, the locksmith said flatly. That's not my field. He snapped his toolbox shut. You'll need a home automation specialist. I allowed myself a private smile. There was only one man within 200 miles who could touch that system, Darren Miles. And Darren worked only for me. The locksmith left. Calvin stood there on the porch with his hands on his hips before slumping back to his car. The lock stayed firm. The cameras stayed live. That night, I kept every feed open. The house sat in silence, dark but watchful. Monday slipped by without a call. Tuesday, 8:03 p.m. The crunch of tires on gravel hit the entryway mic. I checked the feed. Calvin and Genevieve. No parents this time. They didn't head for the villa. They came to my door in Phoenix, carrying the look of people who'd run out of polite options. Genevieve stood a step behind Calvin, arms crossed, jaw set tight. Open up, Dad, Calvin called. I opened. He pushed right in. Genevieve's perfume struck me before her words did. Sharp, citrus, expensive. This game ends now, Calvin said. Either you stop this nonsense and hand over the villa, or, he glanced back at Genevieve. Or what? I asked. Her voice was low, controlled. Or you'll never see us again. No holidays. No visits. No grandkids. Once, that threat would have cut deep. Now it was just information. So that's a threat? I said evenly. It's reality. Calvin shot back. You're an old man, Dad. Alone. Why do you even need a place like that? I looked at them both. Funny perspective, coming from people who tried to move in without asking. Genevieve's eyes flashed. We thought you'd be reasonable. I am, I said. I'm keeping what's mine. Calvin stepped closer. You think you're clever? We'll sue. Harassment. Emotional distress. We'll tell everyone what you did. Based on what evidence? His jaw worked, but no words came. This isn't over, he finally said. I leaned against the doorframe, my tone calm. I think it is. They left without another word. I didn't bother watching them go. Back in my study, I pulled out a notepad and jotted down what I needed. That conversation gave me the final piece. Tomorrow, I'd call Marcus, then a few others. Calvin thought this was about intimidation and tech. He was wrong. The real endgame was paperwork. Legal, binding, permanent. The house could scare them, but I wanted them locked out for good. The next morning, Phoenix woke gray and windless. The kind of sky that makes you feel the day itself is holding its breath. I poured a black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and sat at my desk with the cup in one hand, my phone in the other. My thumb hovered over a name, Marcus Hall. Marcus. I'd known him for 22 years. Not just an attorney. He was a man who knew exactly how to close a statute book on someone's face and make it feel inevitable. We'd met back when Claire and I bought our first rental property. He'd handled every transaction since. When he picked up, his voice was calm, clipped, efficient. "Arthur, what can I do for you?" "I need to protect Clearview Lake Villa," I said, permanently. "No disputes, no loopholes. No one, my son, his wife, their families, can ever claim it as theirs." There was the faint scratch of a pen at his end. "All right, what's the situation?" I gave him the condensed version. Calvin's threats on the porch, Genevieve's thinly veiled warnings, the Monroes lounging in my deck chairs, sipping my wine. The haunting that had sent them running. Marcus whistled low. "And I assume you don't want to sell outright." "No," I said, "but I don't want it in my name anymore either. Not if it means they'll keep circling." "That leaves a couple of options," he said. "Cleanest, transfer ownership into an irrevocable trust or donate directly to an entity you control. Or charity. Faster if you have one in mind. Papers drawn in 48 hours. Once signed and recorded, untouchable." I thought of Claire. Her voice, steady, warm, reminding me of the local Veterans Recovery Center she'd loved. Clearview Lake wasn't just a property. It was a place she believed could heal. Maybe it still could. "Veterans Rest Initiative," I said. "They've been trying to buy land near the lake for years. Give it to them." Marcus didn't miss a beat. "Understood. You'll still be able to visit, of course. I'll add a clause. Honorary lifetime access for you and anyone you name, revocable only by you." "Perfect," I said. We met that afternoon. By 2, I was in Marcus's wood-paneled office, the kind of place where even the air carried legal weight. Windows overlooked downtown, blinds half closed. Marcus slid a stack of documents across the desk. "Deed transfer," he said. "Gift agreement with Veterans Rest." He tapped the last page. "Clause you requested. Lifetime honorary access for you and anyone you name. Revocable only by you." I read every line, every comma, every clause, then signed. The moment the pen left the page, it felt like the villa's weight had shifted off my shoulders onto a foundation Calvin couldn't touch. Marcus gathered the papers. "I'll have this recorded with the county clerk first thing tomorrow. By Friday, it'll be public record. Anyone who searches the deed will see Veterans Rest Initiative listed as the owner." "And Calvin?" I asked. Marcus's small, dry smile said it all. "He can hire every lawyer in the state. Won't matter. The property's beyond reach." That evening, I sat in my study with the villa's camera feed on my laptop. The place lay quiet, washed in the gold of the setting sun. At 7:12 p.m., headlights swept across the driveway, Calvin's truck. Genevieve in the passenger seat. They jumped out fast, marching up to the front door like it was theirs. Calvin tried his key. The lock stayed dead. He pounded, called out once. "No, Dad. No, Arthur." Just a harsh, "Open up." When no answer came, he stepped back and glared at the house like it had personally insulted him. Genevieve pulled out her phone. "This is harassment," she said to the camera. "Unlawful eviction. We'll see him in court." I almost laughed. She didn't know the ink on the transfer was already dry. The next morning, Calvin called again. "We're taking legal action," he said flatly. "By the time you file anything," I said, calm, "you might want to check who owns the villa." "What are you talking about?" "It's not mine anymore," I said. "And it's not yours." Silence. "Then what the hell did you do?" "I honored your mother's memory," I said. Something he seemed to have forgotten how to do. His voice rose. "You gave it away. To whom?" "You'll find out soon enough," I said. "Public record by Friday." He was breathing hard. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said. "I'm going to sleep better than I have in years." The line went dead. 2 days later, the news broke faster than I expected. Veterans Rest Initiative posted a photo on social media. Their director on the villa's porch, lake glittering behind her. Caption: "We are beyond grateful to accept the generous donation of Clearview Lake Villa from Mr. Arthur Hale. This retreat will serve as a place of healing for veterans and their families for decades to come." Local papers picked it up. A couple of online outlets too. By noon, my phone buzzed with calls and texts, not from Calvin, but from people I hadn't heard from in years, offering congratulations or curiosity. When Calvin finally called, his voice was flat, almost stunned. "So that's it. You'd rather give it to strangers than your son." "I'd rather give it to people who will respect it," I said. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I corrected quietly. "You did that yourself." Nothing left for him to say. I closed the call, leaned back, and looked out at the Phoenix skyline. The villa was no longer mine, but safe. Claire's place. My place. Now there, veterans could use it for something good. And Calvin? Locked out. Not by deadbolts, not by haunted house tricks, but by a barrier no tantrum or lawyer could break. The war wasn't escalating anymore. It was over. And I had won. Thursday morning came bright and clean, phoenix sky like a cut piece of glass. I woke before the alarm, already dressed in my mind. Gray suit, white shirt. The tie Eleanor had said made me look like I meant everything I said. On the kitchen counter, a folder held certified copies of the recorded deed, waited to stay put. I transferred the gift agreement to the Veterans Rest Initiative, including the clause that gave me lifetime access. My name was on it. My keys to a door Calvin would never set foot in. At 9:55, I pushed open the glass door to Marcus Lee's office. The receptionist glanced up, smiled, and said, "Mr. Hale, conference room B." They were already here. Already here? Of course they were. The insecure always show up early. The uninvited always show up angry. The room smelled like lemon polish and paper. Marcus sat at the head of the table, a neat stack of documents perfectly aligned with the edge. Across from him, Calvin's jaw was tight, clenched like a steel trap. Genevieve sat with arms crossed, eyes rimmed with sleepless red. Lawrence and Sylvia Monroe were side by side on the bench against the wall, dressed as if dignity could be ironed into their clothes. "Good morning," I said, sliding into my seat beside Marcus and folding my hands. Calvin didn't bother with a greeting. "We're here to resolve this now," he said. Marcus raised a palm. "You're here to be informed. This isn't a negotiation." The words hit them like a door that wouldn't budge. Genevieve gave a small laugh, sharp and humorless. "We'll see about that." Marcus slid a single-page printout halfway across the table. "Start here, the County Recorder's Index." He tapped it. Clearview Lake, recorded owner, Veterans Rest Initiative. As of yesterday at 10:03 a.m., the gift deed, compliance affidavit, and transfer tax paperwork are complete, and in legal terms, irrevocable. A heavy silence settled over the room. Calvin blinked first. Irrevocable. People reverse things all the time. "Not this," Marcus said. "Irrevocable means exactly what you fear it does." Genevieve leaned forward, fingers manicured, tapping the paper. "You can't just give away generational property. He's my husband. We have a familial right." "No, you don't," Marcus said. "Even in Arizona, community property laws don't apply to gifts post-retirement when the property is solely titled and the transfer meets charitable conveyance standards. Your so-called familial right exists only in your language, not in our statutes." Lawrence cleared his throat, trying to sound reasonable. "We're not looking for trouble. We just need somewhere to live. You thought you could move into a house that wasn't yours." I interrupted, "And you told me to get off my own porch to make it happen." Sylvia leaned forward, hands flat on the table, pearls trembling at her throat. "After everything our daughter has done for your son," she stopped, realizing sentiment didn't carry weight in this room. Marcus lifted another document. "There's also this, a notice of no trespass and cease harassment on behalf of Mr. Hale and the Veterans Rest Initiative. If any of you enter the Clearview Lake property without Mr. Hale's express written invitation as the lifetime access holder, it's criminal trespass. And if you continue the calls, texts, or any unlawful pressure, we will pursue all remedies available." Calvin scoffed. "Lifetime access. So he gave it away but kept it for himself?" "He donated the property," Marcus said. "He reserved a donor access privilege for personal use, at the charity's discretion. That's perfectly legal. He can be there whenever the villa isn't booked for programs. You, however, have no right to set foot inside." Calvin's mouth opened and closed. "So he wins," he said finally, bitter. "Is that the big performance? Drag us down here just to watch him win?" His eyes locked on me. "You'd rather give it to strangers than your son." "I'd rather give it to people who understand what a home truly is," I said. "It's not leverage. It's not a tribute. And it's not punishment for a grieving father." A thin red line crept up Genevieve's neck. "This isn't over. We'll tell people what he did to us. We'll tell them about the—" She cut herself off on the word house, as if the memory still choked her. Marcus didn't blink. "Tell them whatever you want. The public record will tell a different story. A donor giving a lakeside property to veterans for healing retreats." Journalists already called this morning. You may have noticed the photos. Calvin shot a look at Genevieve. There it was. They'd seen the posts, the comments, the little blue hearts that never land on the people you wish they would. Sylvia's voice was small, almost apologetic. We didn't mean harm. We thought it made sense. He's alone. He doesn't even use it. I looked at her without anger, thinking of Eleanor, how she would straighten a place setting with 2 fingers, gentle yet firm. I use it, I said. I use it to remember my wife. I use it to sit by the water and find my quiet. And even if I didn't use it at all, it still wouldn't make it yours. Marcus reached for the final set of papers and fanned them out for them to see. To avoid any confusion, here are certified copies of the gift deed and the donative intent letter. Here's the recorded notice of donor access for Mr. Hale. And here are letters addressed to each of you memorializing today's warning. Calvin stared at the pages like they were written in a language he didn't understand. You planned this, he said. Not at the start, I replied. But the moment you told me I wasn't allowed at my own home, you taught me exactly how this was going to end. He pushed back from the table so fast the chair legs screeched. You've destroyed our family. I'm enforcing a boundary, I said. Family survives boundaries. It dies without them. Lawrence raised both palms, pleading, like a foreman begging a storm for mercy. Can we at least discuss a transition period to arrange something else? Marcus slid a slim, white envelope across the table. A check from Mr. Hale to the Veterans Rest Initiative in your name. Lawrence and Sylvia glanced at the envelope, marked for relocation assistance vouchers. The charity would issue it back to them in service credits through their partner housing organization. It wouldn't buy a lake view, it would buy them time. Sylvia stared at the envelope as if it might bite. We don't want his charity. I met her eyes. You wanted my charity at the lake. Genevieve tried to reclaim her confident tone. Are we done? We are, Marcus said. Unless you'd like me to explain the law on irrevocable one more time. Calvin flinched, as if the words struck him between the eyes. Then he turned toward the door, hand on the handle, and stopped. He didn't look back when he spoke. You know what's the worst part? I keep hearing Mom's voice telling me to be better than this. I thought maybe, if I pushed hard enough, that voice would get quieter. He swallowed hard. It never did. The door opened and closed behind them. They filed out in a line that wasn't a family anymore, just 4 people tied together by shared loss and a failed plan. Once the room was empty, Marcus gathered the papers with the same careful precision he'd used to lay them out. You executed perfectly, he said. Paper walls, I replied. They look fragile until you walk right into one. He almost smiled. So what will you do now? I'll drive, I said. There's a place I haven't visited properly in months. The road to Clearview wound its usual path, scrub, pines, and then that first flash of water that still took the air out of my chest. I pulled into the gravel driveway, just as the afternoon light turned the lake into hammered copper. On the porch, a woman waited, hair pulled into a low knot, clipboard in hand. She stepped forward, professional, but there was warmth behind her smile. Mr. Hale, I'm Dana Ortiz, Program Director for Veterans Rest. We shook hands. I thought we'd keep the dedication small, she said. You'll have your time here, and when our clients come, they'll have theirs. Inside, the house felt quiet, like a place caught between seasons. No tech buzzing, no projectors, no speakers. They'd all been boxed and returned to Darren with a thank you note and a bottle of bourbon he'd pretend he hadn't earned. The air smelled of wood, soap, and the faint echo of a fight that would never happen here again. Dana walked with me through the rooms, listening as I showed her where Eleanor liked to read, where the morning light hid in winter, how the kitchen drawer stuck when the barometer fell. She took notes like a steward, not a guest. We'll bring a small group next month, she said softly. 5 couples to start, space to breathe, no constant bracing for phone calls. Good, I said. That's what this house does. We were at the window overlooking the dock when the sound of tires on gravel reached us. I didn't need a camera feed to know that sound. You expecting someone? Dana asked. No, I said. But I expected this. A knock came, fast and hard enough to rattle the deadbolt. I opened the door because I chose to, not because anyone had a right to be there. Calvin stood on the porch alone, sunlight bleaching his face into something almost young again. You drove fast, I said. He glanced past me, taking in the empty living room, the same room that had moved, whispered, and sent him running before. Is it true? He asked, about the veterans. It's true, I said. It's done. He looked down at his shoes, then back up at me. I said awful things, he admitted. You did, I agreed. He took a breath, trying to organize words for an apology he couldn't quite form. Genevieve, he started. We thought if we pushed hard enough, you'd become the man you remember from 3 years ago, I said. The one who mistook kindness for surrender. His eyes flicked at me. He took a half step back. Do you hate me? He asked. No, I said. But I stopped letting you make me small. He swallowed, nodded, and for a moment, I saw the boy who used to drop a baseball in the driveway and look at me, expecting we'd find it together if it rolled under the car. What happens now? He asked. Behind me, Dana coughed softly, a reminder this wasn't our house anymore. It had a mission bigger than both of us. Now, I said, you go home. Figure out who you want to be besides entitled. Then, if one day you can enter a room without hunting for an angle, you call me. Until then, I gestured to the lake. This place is busy. Busy, he repeated, as if the word might make room for something inside him. He looked past me one last time, shook his head at whatever it was he saw in himself, and walked back to his car. I watched the tail lights fade down the ribbon of road. Dana stood beside me, the quiet between us comfortable, the kind that comes when you understand victory doesn't always throw confetti. You okay? She asked. Better than okay. I stepped onto the porch, letting the air settle around me. I'm done apologizing to people who want what's mine. She closed her clipboard. One more thing, she said. The board approved a plaque for the entry, understated. Just a line in memory of Eleanor Hale. May this house be a quiet kind of healing. Only if you approve it, I said, letting the lake speak first. I didn't answer right away. The water moved like breath. The pines shifted and clicked. She'd like that, I said. Quiet kind of healing. Dana smiled. Then we'll set it. She left me there, under the board meeting of trees, with the water holding the light and letting it go. I walked down to the dock, shoes on the warm boards, thinking about boundaries, paper walls, and all the years I spent believing love meant filling a grown man's empty spaces with a house key. The wind lifted, skimmed the water. There was no audience now. No need for a performance. Just a man who had given away a thing to keep the part of himself that built it. As the sun sank and the cold crept up from the lake, I turned back toward the house and caught my reflection in the window. Just a man a little older than 65, and a lot steadier than the one who once smiled while being erased. My phone buzzed. A single text from Calvin. I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk like a son. I typed nothing. Some messages are answered by the life you live, not the words you send. I opened the door with my key, stepped into a house that would never again be a weapon against me, and closed it behind me. The sound wasn't victory, and it wasn't finality. It was something better. Irreversible. The first snow came earlier than the forecast promised. Phoenix had mild days stretching into December, but Clearview Lake didn't follow city schedules. I'd driven up that morning with a thermos of coffee, a stack of old photographs, and no real plan. The sky was pewter, the lake no longer pretending to be glass. It looked like steel. Dana had left a note on the kitchen counter. 5 couples would arrive Friday. 2 of the couples were Gold Star families. One was a father and son, both veterans, trying to talk for the first time in years. She signed the note with just a D and a looping underline, as if even her handwriting knew when to hold back. The silence in the villa felt different now. Before, it had been defensive, like a house holding its breath, waiting to see who would claim it next. Now, the room seemed to breathe freely, unguarded. Even the pine floors, which used to groan at night, now creaked with an air of quiet acceptance. I poured coffee into a mug that didn't match the others. Eleanor used to choose mugs like they were souvenirs from trips we hadn't taken. This one was chipped at the rim, the kind you keep not for its perfection, but because your hand remembers the shape, the feel. I walked down to the dock, the air biting lightly with each step. The cold came up through the boards, honest and straightforward, not unpleasant. Across the lake, a thin curl of smoke rose from a chimney, pale against the snow-patched pines. I thought of Calvin, how he had stood here the last time, searching my face for something he couldn't name. It had been 6 weeks since the meeting at Marcus's office. Beyond that single text, I hadn't heard from him. I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk like a son. I wasn't expecting an update. Readiness is like thawing ice. You can't rush it. No amount of staring will make it melt faster. Still, I kept my phone on during these trips, not because I was waiting, but because silence can be its own kind of conversation. The crunch of tires on gravel broke the quiet. I turned, half expecting Dana, but the truck was older, an early 2000s Ford, paint dulled by sun, still moving with purpose. It stopped halfway up the drive. The door opened, and a man stepped out. Not Calvin. Taller, broader in the shoulders, posture weighed down by unfamiliarity. He wasn't used to stepping onto another man's property without an invitation. His brown jacket was plain, frayed at the cuffs, hair streaked with early gray. "You're Hale?" he called. "I am," I said, staying on the dock. "I'm Nathan Jenkins. My unit served with a man named Daniel Price. Said this place was going to be for guys like us." "You're the donor," I said, nodding. "You served with Price 2 tours. He told me about the lake when I ran into him at a VA event. Said it was the only place he'd been in years where he could breathe without the walls closing in." Nathan's voice wasn't sentimental. Matter of fact, almost like he was reporting coordinates. "Thought I'd see it for myself before the others come." I gestured to the dock. "You're seeing it." He stepped onto the boards, boots thudding softly. He didn't look at me at first, just stared at the water. You ever notice how still water can mess with your head? Makes you think it's safe to walk on when it's not. Then snap, you're under. "I've noticed," I said. He nodded. "Guess that's why this place works. You can stand here, see it's deep and still be okay." We stood without talking for a while. A pair of ducks traced a slow wake across the far side, heading toward the reeds. "You lost someone here?" Nathan asked finally. "Not here," I said. "But this was hers. And after she was gone, people I thought were mine tried to make it theirs." He didn't ask for details. Combat men rarely do. "Well," he said, "now it's ours. And we won't waste it." When he left, the gravel crunch faded quickly, as if the lake had swallowed it whole. I went back inside, set the mug in the sink, and found myself staring at the front door longer than necessary. By late afternoon, snow had started drifting. I lit the fireplace, not for warmth, but because winter light belongs to fire the way summer light belongs to water. That was when the second set of tires rolled in. This time, I knew the sound before the engine even cut. Calvin's newer SUV idled just long enough to make me think he might leave without stepping out, but he didn't. He climbed the porch steps slowly, hands tucked into his coat pockets, eyes tracing the grain of the wood like it might give him courage. "I brought coffee," he said, lifting a cardboard carrier with 2 cups. "Don't know if you still drink it this late." "Depends on the company," I replied. We settled into the living room, the fire giving the space a low, steady pulse. He didn't rush into an apology, which, oddly enough, felt like respect. "I've been thinking," he began, "about what you said about boundaries, about family surviving them, or dying when they're ignored." I waited. I told Genevieve I needed space. She said space is just another word for leaving, so I guess I left. Been staying in a rental. Gave her the lake back in my head a dozen times. Still doesn't make it mine. He looked at the fire, as if it might hand him the rest of his words. "I came today because I don't want to be the guy who only calls when he needs something. And I don't want you to think I'm here to undo what you did. I'm not." The fire popped, and the room fell into a quiet pause. "I am sorry," he said finally, "for how I spoke to you. For thinking Mom's voice was supposed to fade. It's louder now, and I'm trying to listen." I didn't rush to answer. Apologies are like seeds. You don't yank them out to see if they've grown. Instead, I poured the coffee into 2 of Eleanor's old mugs and set one in front of him. "If you want to come back here sometime, when it's not full, talk to Dana. She handles the schedule now." His brow lifted at the formality, but he nodded. "Fair enough." We talked for another half hour about work, the rental's lousy water heater, nothing that could be twisted into an argument later. Then he stood at the door. "You look better than the last time I saw you," he said. "I am better," I said. He left without a handshake, without a promise to call, and that was fine. Some bridges don't need fanfare to stand. They just need to stop burning. The snow came harder that night, tapping against the windows like small reminders. I stayed another 2 days, long enough to see the first group of veterans arrive. Dana greeted them in the driveway. No speeches, just handshakes, smiles, a welcome that didn't need more words. From the dock, I watched them walk the perimeter, shoulders relaxing, boots crunching through the thin crust of snow. One man lingered at the water's edge, just like Nathan had. I didn't interrupt. Later, as the fire warmed the main room and laughter began, low at first, then stronger, I realized something. The villa didn't belong to me anymore. Not in the way it once had, and that was the point. I locked up that night, knowing Calvin might come back someday, or he might not. Both possibilities could exist in the same winter without tearing at each other. When I finally drove back to Phoenix, the lake receded in the rearview mirror, silver under the morning sun. Some places you keep, some places you give away, and some places, if you're lucky, teach you the difference.